Hi everyone. I had a chance to meet many of you going around, and I hope to meet the rest of you after we finish. And we have to take a group photo because there's so many beautiful, mostly are all lifters in the room. If I speak up here, can you hear me, or do you want me to hit the mic? Okay, because I'd rather be able to cruise around and connect with all of you. So here's our order of operation. First off, meet Julie and her back here. Julian has the totally eclectic and thankless at times task of being my assistant and keeping me and my two little girls and my husband and family and such and my work life going and balanced, and is the reason that I was able to get here today. So thank you, Julian. He's also going to help keep me on time because I want to talk for about maybe 20 minutes and then really have at least 20 minutes for Q&A. Just to see where you guys are in your thinking about LIFT and you're thinking about the next 50 years of the war on poverty, anything and everything. I'm an open book, so come at me with all your questions. And then before you leave, if we can do it, I would love to take a group photo just to have, remember, tweet out. But again, my name is Kirsten Lodal. I'm LIFT's co-founder and have served as the CEO for the last 15 years, and it is such an honor to be here with you. Congratulations on, is it our 4th Poverty Awareness Week that LIFT has been spearheading here in Chicago, hosted by the wonderful, wonderful people at Loyola. And this university has been such a great partner to us, and we get to honor its fabulous president, Father Garanzini, which is a long time coming and will be wonderful at our annual benefit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to today, just to tell you the founding story of how LIFT got started. I think sometimes we take for granted that people know the roots of this work, and even Ben was telling me, I wasn't until 6 years after he started working for LIFT that he heard the founding story. And so I thought I would talk to you about the founding story, and then talk a little bit about, kind of my perspective on the moment in time that we're in, 50 years post-war on poverty, looking towards the next several decades, and the opportunity that all of us in this room have to be leading. For starters, I also just want to thank you all for your service, for caring, for being relentless and persistent and fearless advocates. We can actually turn this off for a moment. No problem. I'll come back to this later. That's a little sneak peek of a funny part of the story. But to thank you for everything that you're doing, and I know that this work can be so hard, and I know that sometimes success can feel fleeting, and we are up against such huge systemic barriers, like not enough affordable housing, like systemic racism, like a totally messed up criminal justice system that doesn't focus on how it is that people can re-enter society successfully. And I think this room of people sees the world in a very particular way that hopefully can be more the way that the whole country sees the world. But you all, I think, are on the vanguard of a next generation of civil rights leaders in this country. And great movements in our society have always been led by students and young people, undergrads, grad students, the civil rights movement, which really launched the war on poverty. Everything that's happened now with marriage equality and the other types of seismic shifts in our society that we're undertaking have been really started by student movements. And I think we should plan that it's going to be this community of lifters who are really going to be the people leading our charge into the next 50 years of the war on poverty in this country. So to rewind a little bit, I grew up in Washington, D.C. That's where I live today. I've got a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old and a fabulous husband. My justice nerve, as it were, was really stoked from an incredibly early age by my parents, who were both kind of in every way first generation in their family, first generation everything. And my mom, who grew up in this dusty little teeny town in West Texas, and thanks to farm subsidies and the GI Bill and other things like that, was able to make her way to Washington, D.C. as a teacher. So from an early age, started these things I always think of as social justice tuck-ins, where she would tell me these stories about this idea that we're all living on the edge and kind of teetering on the edge of stability, of safety, of security, and we'd better not get too comfortable in our seemingly privileged environments, because any of us are just really one circumstance away from falling off that edge. And the fact that we're up on maybe the side of the mountain has as much to do with luck as anything else. We're great, we work hard and such, but let's face it, there's just so much luck involved. And so she would always talk about this idea that we'd better spend our time helping to catch people who are at risk of falling off that ledge or who have already fallen off, because someday we're going to need catching too. And then we would sing Amazing Grace, and this was just kind of imprinted into my DNA from an early age. And now that I'm a mom, I keep thinking, gosh, the bar is high. I've got to figure out some way to be infusing this into my own daughters. This sense that, this isn't about noblesse oblige. This isn't about guilt, cheap grace, charity. This is about how we as a society should relate to one another, and also how we need to humbly understand just the reality of our circumstances and how quickly they could change, and how much we might need people in our corner at some time too. So I took that into a lot of service and activist work through high school. I was fortunate when I was a senior in high school that my high school kind of, probably like many of yours, it just acknowledged the reality of senioritis. And second semester senior year allowed us to craft our own senior projects. And I mean, they were pretty eclectic. Some people were doing yoga, learning how to throw pottery. I was really interested in child advocacy, and had the great privilege of just kind of, letter writing my way into getting to work in the office of Marian Wright Edelman, the visionary founder of the Children's Defense Fund and a great civil rights leader, a friend of Martin Luther King Jr.'s and others. And I spent half my time working for Marian in her office and half of my time working as an assistant teacher in a Head Start program for predominantly homeless families. And this was in 1997, and it was right as welfare reform was being implemented. So welfare reform had been passed the year before and was being implemented, and my work at the Children's Defense Fund was really calling around the country to child care providers to find out how one of the new mandates of welfare reform were affecting that. So much of what I was hearing about was just that they couldn't begin to keep up with the pace of the work mandates that welfare reform had required in terms of the child care needs of families. And all these wonderful providers really were feeling the sense of unbelievable helplessness and in a lot of ways hopelessness around the capacity to really set people up for success. And then in my teaching work, what I was, even though I got into that work thinking that I might want to ultimately be a teacher or a child advocate, and I felt very connected to the kids, what happened was that I became super, super inspired by the parents of the children in the Head Start program. And in order to be in this program, you had to technically qualify to be homeless, which I don't know what the system is like in Chicago, but certainly in DC, just the sheer process of getting that technical qualification to say, yes, you are homeless, is so awful and demoralizing and just heart-wrenching. And everyone had to go through that process to even be in this program. And what my experience was that here you had parents who were really at the lowest moment of their lives. They are homeless, they have children, they are thinking about the safety of their families, the security of their kids, the education of their kids, their own, whether they can get food, shelter, etc. And yet they were managing to get their kids to school every day. They were looking for jobs. But what I was struck by was that there were just so few resources to kind of partner with them in that. And the one social worker at this entire huge Head Start program was just dealing with triage issues around the kids' educational and school needs. And in some ways, even the teachers, who I totally respected, but there was kind of this culture of vilifying the parents and vilifying the families and the communities, in the sense that the parents and the community that these kids came from were the enemy. And that was really eye-opening for me, to see even within kind of a helper culture, as it were, the extent to which it just really felt like judgments, misperceptions, stereotypes were being perpetuated even in that environment. And I just was seeing things very differently. But I was also a high school senior. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't think I had any great skills, but I did feel that I was sensing something different about the capacity and the engagement of the families of these kids. And so, kind of vigilante style on the side, I probably broke a bunch of rules I shouldn't have broken and such, so, you know, don't do as I say, not as I do, right? But I started working with a number of families just on the side, after hours. Again, I was where I was in my life. I didn't pretend to have any great skills, but I started to find that very simple things could have a remarkably large impact. For starters, just listening to someone, truly, deeply listening, taking them seriously, asking questions about dreams and aspirations, which in some cases were such shocking questions for people. And it was yet another part of kind of, I think, my own privilege I had taken for granted, this idea that, you know, aspiration is the norm, and that we all live in environments where we're taught to believe we can do and be anything. Well, I think in the end we can do and be anything, but sometimes we have to unlock people's innate capacity to aspire by asking questions. And that became so clear to me early on. It was the early days of the internet, and I happened to have some computer skills. So I was able to help people there. I had some language skills, so I could travel around town with folks providing some translation services. I had just successfully applied to college, so I knew a lot about self-promotion, work in the system, putting together resumes, you know, and that seemed to come in handy with helping people who so often undervalued themselves actually figure out how to put themselves on paper in a compelling way in a resume. And again, it was just so interesting to see these, just a different light in people's eyes. A light bulb going off around their own capacity the first time they would see a resume that looked like a serious, accomplished, determined person. And to realize that so often these parents had deeply internalized the messages that society would tell you about yourself if you are a homeless parent in America, likely a homeless parent of color in America. And so from there was really no turning back. I kind of pushed off some other commitments for many more months, ended up working at this Head Start program, eventually had to go to college, and went to Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, which in a lot of ways is the ultimate ivory tower in the midst of the pretty divested post-industrial community. And very quickly started getting involved in the available volunteer work that was out there, which was mostly after-school program and children's programming, and started going through the same process of really feeling like, you know, when I was aware that so many of these kids were struggling with homelessness, were struggling with basic needs, with food security, with their parents being at the risk of unemployment, it felt like it was going to be hard to change the circumstances for these children if we didn't also focus on helping their parents. And so then again, started getting very involved in helping parents find childcare, other types of things. And the head of the YMCA in New Haven, which mostly ran childcare programs, had seen me a bunch of times coming in with parents just on my own, advocating for childcare, which was just such a huge need, so hard to get. And often it was just about, you know, elbow grease and persistence, whether or not you could get a childcare slot. And he was saying, you know, I've seen you. And I'm skeptical about you highfalutin Yale people, but you seem different. You actually seem like, you know, you're committed, and that this isn't about a short-term resume booster. And the fact of the matter is we need people doing the kind of work that you're doing with parents, and all of the kids in our center can use that kind of support for their families. Have you ever thought about taking what you're doing on a one-on-one way and making a system out of it and recruiting some of your friends and people who are like-minded to get involved? And I thought, well, not really. And he said, well, you know, think about it, and if you do, I'll give you space. I've got the second floor of this building. And if you do this and you're serious and you're committed, I'll give you space to get going. And so I was kind of like, wow, okay, this feels like an invitation I don't know how to start an organization or program or anything, but there are a lot of smart people around me. My co-founder, Brian Kreider, was my boyfriend at the time, a natural co-founder. We're still good friends. He's not who I'm married to. But it was an early lesson of you just work the network you got, right, to get things done. We got 50 of our friends and kind of movers and shakers on campus, people like you guys who we admired, into a room. Our friends were mandated to come, or else they would not be our friends anymore. We had printed out these little funny, just podunk business plans. It would be hilarious to show you. I should bring that as an archival thing. We got this whole group of about 50 of our friends and peers together and passed around these plans to say, let's do this. We need to, though, first figure out who are all the service providers in the community, who are the employers, how are we going to raise some money. We need to build a local advisory board of social workers and public interest lawyers and others who can help us figure out our forms, our paperwork. We got to build an information management system. Oh, hi, guy in the dorm room next door who's starting an internet company, building databases. Will you build us what was Corey? Do you all remember this? Any of you long timers before we had Link and other systems? Our first data management system was built by a guy at the dorm room over. The university donated us furniture and computers and all these things, and the YMCA followed through and gave us an entire floor of their building. And that's really how Lyft got started. And in our first 3 months, we had more than 100 people come through our doors. Really amazing things started to happen. Classmates were going to court with individuals, serving as layperson advocates, helping them stay out of jail by affirming the fact that they were looking for employment and that it would be better for their families if they could stay in the mainstream society and not be put behind bars. We had, individuals getting job interviews for the first time, getting linked up with much needed mental health services. It was amazing, and so I decided to step away from school. Again, for a while, this felt like the more important thing for me to be doing. I did eventually go back, but I took another year off to get this going. And, in the brazen naivete of just not knowing anything, we were like, hey, 3 months in, let's take this thing national, right? I mean, it's time. It has to be a movement. We've gotten it figured out, let's do it. And if we're gonna be a national organization, we should have headquarters in DC, because that's the site of the federal government. So let's figure out how to get some space in DC. And we need some money. So we have to meet the president, and we need to ask him for $1 million because we have this model and we need to scale it. And so we decided to just start writing to anyone and everyone that we could find who was around the president, working on welfare at work issues and national service issues through AmeriCorps and things like that. And we eventually found our way to this amazing man named Eli Siegel, who I think we had just stalked so intensively, and he was kind of like, who are these students caring about these seemingly kind of unsexy issues? He agreed to meet with me and Brian early in the summer of 1999. And we were saying, we've started this effort to tie students, but ultimately it could be anyone from the community, into an effort to partner with individuals who want to achieve great things for their families and who just need a partner, problem solver, someone to listen with them. We think this can actually fill in a lot of the holes of welfare reform and make that policy better. And we want to meet the president because we think that he should fund this. And Eli, who was amazing and became a great mentor, unfortunately he's since passed, was, I think, just so taken aback by these kids wanting to do this work, clearly who didn't understand how you're supposed to play the game, who were probably so undeferential, inappropriately dressed, whatever it all was, that he just decided to get behind us. And in August of 1999, he invited us and 30 of our founding lifters, who were all students like you, undergraduate and grad students, to come here to Chicago to President Clinton's Welfare to Work conference that he co-sponsored with then Mayor Daley, which which was meant to be, in a lot of ways, Clinton's kind of final closing salvo before he left the presidency. And we had these 30 students. We drove across the country from DC. At the time, I don't know if McDonald's even does this anymore, but there was like the McDonald's Monopoly thing. Does that still happen? So that was initially our plan to get $1 million. Was that we were like 30 college kids road tripping to Chicago. We'll eat enough McDonald's that someone's gonna get the $1 million jackpot. So that didn't totally work out. But we got, in the last Chicago, we had printed up t-shirts, like these bright blue, like this, audacious t-shirts that we were all wearing that said, "Join us" on the back. And I think, you know, one of his handlers was like, "Who are these kids in the blue t-shirts? They look great behind the dais where he's gonna be speaking." And so somehow we insinuated our way to be sitting behind the dais of President Clinton, and we had taken him a t-shirt. Because we were like, whenever we see him, you know, he loves running in t-shirts, so we'll take his. And lo and behold, you know, he caught wind of these 30 kids behind him. And this is where now you can flash this back up. We beelined for him right afterwards. We took him our t-shirt. There are a bunch of us, you can see. This is me with a kind of funny face. Deanna Singh, the founder of our Bronx office, a bunch of other folks. This was down at Navy Pier. We took him this t-shirt and had a conversation and said, "Here's what we're doing, and we think that you should give us $1 million to make this happen." And he said, "You know, I like your spirit, and go see my buddy John Porter in Congress, who is then a moderate Republican congressman from the Chicago area, who is in his last term in Congress, head of the Labor HHS Human Services Subcommittee." And eventually, we managed to make our way into John Porter's office by, you know, faxing him this picture and such, saying, the president told us to come see you. We promise. We're not joking. Came in, and 2 years later, we received $1 million from the Department of Labor to really launch Lyft. So this is a very unusual story of Uncle Sam coming in as the growth capital for an organization. And I'm not telling you that the lesson here is to stalk the president, although why not, if you want to do good things. But, you know, you all know what Lyft today is, and, you know, now increasingly close to 150,000 families later, our work in 6 major cities. I think we're on to some real insights that could change and shape the field, and I really do believe that you all, the Lyfters of today, are the leaders of the next 50 years of the war on poverty and a real kind of regenerated poor people's movement in this country, which desperately needs to happen. And all of this is to say is that, you know, there's never a right moment. You're never prepared enough. So it's up to you to decide when you're gonna seize what feels right and take risks, and it often pays off. And I just believe that what you are doing today is so profoundly meaningful. I think you all have the ideas and the insights that are going to shape a much more humane human services system in this country, a much more effective set of policies and practices to lift people out of poverty. And I want to be your booster and your champion, because I'm increasingly, you know, going to be getting into a stage where I need to move out of the way and let you guys lead this next movement. But I really believe so deeply that it's never too early to decide that you want to commit to making a huge difference. And plans can be overrated at times. And in the end, you got to do what feels right to you and what sparks that justice nerve. And I will certainly be in your corner to do that. I know Ben will be and others. And thanks for letting me tell that funny story. And I would love to just open it up for Q&A and talk about what you want to talk about. So thank you. So why don't we, pretty good, Julian, not too bad. All right, so we've got another 20 minutes. I'm gonna leave a little bit of time before you all disappear to get your beautiful mugs on film. But so I would love just start show of hands, would love for you to ask questions. Remind me of your name and tell me your involvement with Lyft or your interest in these issues if you're not a current advocate. So anyone want to start? You said you had some tough questions for me. All right, good. Tough questions, really. Ben can attest. I'm an open book here. So, yeah.
Well, I'm Chris. I'm a volunteer.
Junior, DePaul.
Junior, yes, correct.
All right, excellent.
Volunteer in the Uptown Lyft office. My question relates to social media, because I just had a conversation today.
Can you all hear Chris? Okay.
In our intro to nonprofit management class today about social media and the direction and the influence that it has on nonprofits. And I was kind of curious about your own experiences as a CEO among Lyft with social media, in relation to developing Lyft, making it more visible, more aware, and like how you see our relation with social media to help with the future, or maybe if there's positive or negative sides to social media.
Yeah. Okay, so a whole cluster of questions about social media. So I guess I have, I think there are a couple of layers here. So I'll talk about what it's meant for me as a leader of Lyft. I think I'll talk a little bit about what I think it means for social movements, and then also what I think it could really mean for our members. So, the advent of social media, which has all happened during Lyft's lifetime. I mean, it was really the early days of the internet when we started, much less. There was no Facebook or anything when I was in college. So thank goodness there was no YouTube. I had my a cappella moment, so I'm really happy that was not on film. With all due respect to you guys, you performers out there. But as a leader, it's been such an amazing way to, a lot of us just kind of more transparently and democratically connect with people about what's happening. I would, one of my regrets is still I don't feel like we're as in touch as we could or should be, at Lyft, or for me personally, with all of the advocates who are currently involved with Lyft on social media, or even our supporters, but our ranks are growing a lot, and I think it's just been an amazing way in real time to keep people up to speed with what we're doing, but also to get people involved in policy issues, use it as an educational tool. It's been such a powerful vehicle for us, and I still feel like we're scratching the surface of its use. I think for me as a leader, it's been an amazing way to start moving from just kind of execution, managing, like growing one's own organization, into thinking about how do we really start to shift the conversation about poverty at a field level. How can we be getting our ideas out there again in real time? Because for us, we shouldn't be driven to be highly competitive and closed off and protective. We should want to share what we're doing with the world with hopes that they'll adopt and adapt it. There's just too much work to be done, too many people in need, and too few places we can be at any one time. And I feel like social media has really helped with that and started to put Lyft on the map in a different way, in that kind of thought leadership, field building, and systemic influence mode. And I think more and more that's going to be a tool for us. In terms of social movements, obviously, I think more so outside of the United States, you see how social media, whether it's through even kind of programs like Kiva and practical services like micro-lending, or what's happened in the Arab Spring or in other movements across the world, how much social media is a mobilization tool. And I would be excited to see how it could be more of a mobilization and movement building tool for Lyft and for all of you guys, so you could help us figure out how to plug that in, so it's not just kind of the infomercial vehicle for Lyft, but it's actually a mobilization tool, and I think you'd have to help us figure that out. And then finally, for our members, I think one of the things that's been interesting to me is to see how, in many ways, still cut out kind of the social media landscape our members are, even as vehicles like LinkedIn and others become such powerful tools to build virtual networks and kind of engines of economic gain and job access. And so one of the things I would love for Lyft to be on the cutting edge of, especially because our advocates tend to be so tech savvy, which is not the norm necessarily in the social services field, is to think of how can we be a part of unleashing the kind of opportunity generating potential of technology for our own members, given the era in which which we all exist and the extent to which there still is this pretty profound kind of digital divide, as it were, in our country. But also, as you guys know, and I'm sure as we've been talking about, we've just, in looking more at our data and listening more to our members, we've been hearing so much about the power of social networks, social connectedness, sense of belonging, those kind of social and relational factors in actually advancing people's economic gain. And technology is such an amazing tool for starting to build more of those connections for our members. So I think that's another challenge I would put out to you, is to say, why is it that we on our smartphones right now can manage our fitness goals and order takeout at 3 a.m., but still, our members in so many ways aren't the beneficiaries of what technology can unleash when it comes to coordinating and streamlining our social services system. And I think you guys could figure out how to make that happen. And in the same way that I log into my Facebook account and it kind of curates my entire cultural and social universe for me, and including my consumer universe, which I don't love as much. But why couldn't there be similar tools for our families to help them know when the parent-teacher conference is, their next health appointment, what the eligibility requirements are for something, how it is that they're going to get transportation to this, that, or the other appointment. Like, we have the tools out there. How can we extend those tools to poor, low-income, and other marginalized people in the United States? So that's my answer on social media. Other questions? Yes. And please reintroduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dana Jaffrey. This is my third year as a Lyft advocate. Also one of my last quarters at Lyft. I'm one of the student directors at the Lyft Wilson office. So I just want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. And my question is, Lyft's been running for 16 years nationally. So where do you see Lyft in 5 years as an organization?
Great, good question. So yeah, this is our 15th birthday year, and in so many ways, this organization still feels like a startup and so entrepreneurial, but we also really now have a lot of runway behind us, and I think, so many organizations don't last for even 5 years in the United States. There's some crazy statistic now about how many new nonprofits are started a day. One of you might know it. Do anyone know that statistic? It's some banana statistic or something. Yeah, got it. So I think one of the things we've been talking so much about, and it feeds into the social media answer, is 15 years in, more than 100,000 families served. I mean, at this point, millions of data points, a strong reputation established. We've gotten, yes, there's still issues, growing pains, all that, but we've gotten a lot of that out of our system now. There's a robustness to what we're doing. That feels like a time when we really need to step out as an organization and start thinking not just about self-perpetuation, as it were, but how are we going to take what we're learning and really use it broadly to shift perception, practice, and policy in the field at large, especially when, while we've had, I think, some really extraordinary and in some ways unusual success over the last few years, our trend lines have kind of gone the opposite direction of America's trend lines. We're in a place where really there's more poverty than there's ever been in this country. And I think as of this week, some new statistics came out saying a full half of all Americans are going to live in poverty in their lifetime. I mean, that's staggering, right? That is just staggering. This is not an us versus them issue at all anymore, but it's still, the politics around the work that we do are so atrociously bad that it's impossible to get anything done. And so I think one thing that Lyft has always been great at is telling a different story about what it is to be on shaky ground and to talk about the P word of poverty in a way that's disarming and that helps people connect to the universal human truths that underlie what it takes for all of us to get ahead. And I think there's incredible power in how we can be elevating the stories and experiences of our members, but also really unleashing all the data that we've been so diligently collecting over the years, using institutions like this one and others, and the data scientists and such within them to help us make sense of it all. And really starting to say, on perception, we still somehow live in this crazy era where basically there's still, welfare queen narrative. And we hardly even have welfare anymore, right? And it's half of the country. But so from a storytelling and communication standpoint, how do we start chipping away at perception change? One of the reasons I was so excited in the last 2 years to expand in LA, which just celebrated its first anniversary of member service, was to see Lyft in the heart of the creative elite and the megaphone of America and really the world in terms of storytelling, and to say, like, this story needs to have its Hollywood moment, because that's going to be part of the perception change that we need to have happen. On practice, I think one of the remarkable things about Lyft is that so much of what we're doing is really so basic and so simple. And if we could bottle it up so adaptable and adoptable by other organizations that want to do the right thing, and the social services world of nonprofit providers touches, well more than the 42 to 50 million Americans who are living in poverty, depending on which count you look at. I mean, just if we could look at other nonprofit partners who are so deeply ensconced in the lives of the families we want to change, and to help them give them the confidence to say that seemingly simple things like how you treat people, focusing on dignity and respect, focusing on self-determination, putting people in the driver's seat, helping them unlock their own goals, helping them feel that they have a community of support. This stuff is not soft. It's the stuff. And it's the stuff that we are showing now. We're starting with constituent voice, which you guys have been implementing here to build a credible, data-driven case to say that these simple human truths, like the fact that when we're treated well, we will do better, we can actually build a data case to say that there's a direct line between treating people nicely and economic gain. And that's how we're going to start to change practice, but it's also how we're going to start to change government. It seems crazy that we have to do this. But you all have seen, sadly, I'm sure, many of the still monodirectional, outmoded, awful social services offices that are intended to be the place where people get help, but instead so often are chewed up and spat out. Those places should look like Apple Genius bars. I mean, they should. They should have that focus on dignity, respect, on making people feel like they are people of worth and well treated, because we'll actually see more success. So I think that there's so much that Lyft can be doing to contribute to this dialogue. We're working right now on taking the Lyftopolis simulation, which you all have done, or some of you old-timers have done in different capacities here, where it's a super cool thing coming up in the next 2 months is that we're going to be in New York City doing Lyftopolis with a huge number of the directly most relevant members of the new Mayor de Blasio administration in New York City, as well as a bunch of technology leaders and kind of human-centered design folks to go through Lyftopolis. And then it's this policy tech mashup we're going to do of saying, how could New York City, largest city in the world, actually start to adopt some of Lyft's practices and implement them across human services. And that's actually happening. One exciting thing is that our lead champion and funder for that, the head of the Blue Ridge Foundation, was just tapped by the de Blasio administration to become basically their opportunity czar. And he's now heard so much about constituent voice and other things that we're doing that he has this audacious idea of what would it look like to apply constituent voice across all of New York City's human services providers. I mean, these are big ideas. It will be slow moving for him to get there, but that's a big deal. This is the most influential, well, other than Chicago, but a city that does lead the world, along with Chicago. So, we're able to start having those kinds of conversations at the mayoral level, at the systems level. I think we're trying to get there more out there in the media, and in general, just trying to more generously and openly and courageously share what we're doing, what we're learning, mistakes that we're making. And that's where social media comes into play. Our Chief Program Officer, Maria, has been live blogging this constituent voice rollout as it's been happening, including the mistakes we're making, and that's part of how we're trying to be a better member of the field. And so I think you're going to find in the next 5 years that we are going to be going so deep on just driving next level impact in our direct work with members. I think we're going to see the impact grow, the way that we can measure and communicate it grow, and I think you're going to see us using that more for kind of field level systems changing conversations at the city level and at the macro level. I hope that's what you will see 5 years from now. So let's see, another question. So let's see, how many other questions would you like to ask? These two? Okay, why don't...
My name is Lena. I'm an advocate in the Uptown office. I'm a student at Loyola University. This is my second year with Lyft. My question would be, that statistic of how many nonprofit organizations are started up every single day in America. That implies that there are just so many, and even without that statistic, we can tell that there are just so many social justice issues that need addressing in this country. And in the world, I mean, we all know that.
Yeah.
So kind of in the wake of all of these pressing issues, how do you find it challenging, or I guess how do you respond to them in trying to push the agenda of poverty, awareness, and relief in the wake of all these other social justice issues that also need addressing?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the amazing things about Lyft, and I'm sure you all experienced it, is that we do sit at the intersection of so many issues, and I think part of our core belief is that you can't really look at someone's employment situation independent of their housing situation, independent of their health situation, independent of their childcare situation, independent of the fact that they may be formally incarcerated, independent of their immigration status, you name it. And so, I do think, I always think Lyft advocates have this really unique kind of bird's eye view perch across this huge universe of often kind of independently treated but ultimately totally interconnected social justice issues. And so, I think that's one of the exciting opportunities that exists for people to, who get involved with Lyft, is that they get this broad view, and it's a multi-generational view, and it's a multiracial view, and it's a multi-ethnic view, and it's you name it, multi-geographic view. So I think that's, one of the nice things in a way about, I think, the Lyft philosophy and reality is it's like choosing not to choose. It's basically saying, to the extent that we have kind of ghettoized issues from one another, that's part of why we're failing. I think in terms of domestic kind of versus international poverty and such, sometimes we all get pitted against one another. My belief is that with your guys' help, increasingly, like, that divide is going to be heavily diminished. And the U.S. is so far from leading the world in opportunity creation right now. Unfortunately, we have so much to learn from countries, even formerly seen as developing countries, that are growing their middle class much faster than the United States. The use of technology as an empowerment tool is so much more prevalent in the poorest inner city parts of Bangladesh than it is in the United States right now, and that's true across many parts of the world. And so my feeling there too has been that one of the opportunities Lyft has is to really start to draw more connections between what we're learning in global development, global anti-poverty efforts, and what could be informing a different approach to the next 50 years of fighting poverty in the US. Interestingly, constituent voice, you all know what I'm talking about when I talk about constituent voice, right? All the member surveys. That's a tool that was developed in the UK. Our evaluator and consultant who's been helping us build it is UK based, and that's a tool that's, we're really only the second American organization to implement it. It's mostly been used in Africa and elsewhere. And so even that is kind of a nod to saying we have so much that we need to be learning from what other countries are doing, and there's also opportunities to kind of export our learning. So I'm not sure if that helps to answer your question, except to say I think this is such a rich environment for exploring a lot of issues. And then, I think we have so many lifters who've gone on to decide they really want to focus on criminal justice system reform or housing policy or whatever it is, but this is a great way to learn what you're interested in. Last question, and then I would love to get you beautiful people together for a photo, which Julia can help us take, so bring it home.
My name's Olivia, and I'm a second-year undergrad at Loyola and an advocate at the Uptown office. Going back to the question on the future, now that Lyft has sort of established itself nationally as a good movement for human dignity and justice and advocacy. Do you see Lyft expanding its offices to places like Detroit or like Kansas City, Atlanta, or like other cities to help their impoverished communities as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So about more geographic expansion playing out with yours. Thank you for helping me fill in what I should have answered before. So right now, for the strategy that we're currently pursuing, and we're in year 2 of a 5-year strategic plan that we think still really is strong, we don't have more geographic expansion planned in this next 4 or so year period. I think we've really said the opportunity for us is going deep where we are. And while I think we're all proud of what we're doing and accomplishing, I think we're also humble people who can say there's just so much more that we should be doing where we are and with the members we're currently working with. So much of our data shows us that the longer and more intensively and intentionally members engage with us, the greater ultimate economic outcomes they'll achieve. And we're doing so much work to think about how is it that we can actually drive more meaningful engagement, deepen the programming itself. It's hard to do that kind of like, in some ways, vertical expansion of our impact while at the same time, laterally trying to grow just in volume. I think some of what we've had to say is, listen, again, we're so proud of what we're doing, but relative to the scope of the need, in some ways we should probably think of ourselves as this laboratory for innovation and a demonstration model of a different way that things can be done, and then think about the big scale play as being a systems level play. Say, how are we channeling everything that we're doing so that agencies across Detroit, and in fact I was there about this time last year meeting with 3 of the largest social service providers, kind of having a teaching session around Lyft's model. So that might be that was kind of ad hoc that a funder asked us to do, but there are a lot of ideas we haven't yet figured out of how could we much more quickly actually share the learnings from Lyft with people, not only in those large urban areas that you've talked about, but in rural parts of America. We're just, we're not going to do that anytime soon, because even if we were to expand to 2 or 3 more cities, it's really every city in America that could use Lyft. So I think for now, you're going to see us going deep where we are. That's not to say we won't ever expand again. I think in that way, I don't really know. I think there just may be too compelling of an opportunity, or we may just find that there's a way in which it's like your newest office is able to benefit from all the learnings of the previous offices that were developed, and we've seen that in LA, so it may feel in a while like we want to do that. But for now, I think we're going to stay put where we are and focus on how we can then be helping people in other cities adopt and adapt our practices, and it doesn't have to be under the Lyft brand. I think we're saying like this isn't a field that should be focused on possessiveness. These are a lot of basic ideas about doing the right thing with people that we just want to embolden people with the help of some data to do in their own organizations. So, thanks for asking that. Thank you, guys.